Here's a film in which the protagonists were instantly shown demonstrable proof of his goodness, and then we watch him go downhill from there in a way that is truly tragic. And yet we never forget the spark of goodness that we saw in the beginning. Those are words from director David Lowery on Ulu Grosbard's 1978 film, Straight Time. Seeing Faces in Movies is a podcast where each month I focus on the works of a different director or cinematographer, and each week I invite a guest on to discuss the film and the artist's filmography. I'm your host, Felicia, and this is a special features episode, and these monthly bonus episodes are outside of the filmographies of the current director in focus. Special features came about because I want to talk to someone I love about a film either they love or I love, and hopefully we both love. Today's film in question is one that I've loved for so long. And I had been telling today's guests how they should watch it because it will change their life. And last year, we both had the opportunity to watch it together at the Review Cinema in Toronto for a Neon Dream screening. This film means the absolute world to me, and I will take any chance I get to screen it for people. Quick disclaimer, in the recording with my guests, my voice might sound a little different than usual. Full disclosure, I had a stomach bug the day before, was vomiting for a full 24 hours, and you can hear it in my voice. But I hope you enjoy. So, a quick synopsis of Straight Time. After being released on parole, a career burglar assaults his former probation officer, returns to a life of crime, and goes on the run. The film stars Dustin Hoffman as Max Dembo, Teresa Russell as Jenny Mercer, Gary Busey as Willie Darren, and Harry Dean Stanton as Jerry Shue. It's written by Alvin Sargent, Edward Bunker, and Jeffrey Boehm, and Michael Mann and Nancy Dowd, who are both uncredited. It's based on the novel by Edward Bunker, No Beast So Fierce. Cinematography by Owen Roisman, edited by Sam Osteen and Randy Roberts, and music by David Shire. So today my guest is Darragh McGrath, and you might recognize him as being my very first guest on the show. We talked about Billy Wilder's Ace in the Hole, so I highly recommend you go back and listen to that one if you haven't. Thanks for coming back on the show, Darragh.
Thanks for having me. I'm honored to be the first guest invited back.
Yeah,
or at least recording wise anyway.
I won't make you reintroduce yourself. People can go back and listen to your intro on the first episode. But instead of asking you to talk about your relationship with cinema, I'll ask you, what have you been watching in the last couple months that you would recommend? If you could give me and the listeners like 3 films that you would highly recommend.
That I would highly recommend, yeah. The first would be we were watching a lot of New York-based films, and there was a great one that I'd never heard of called The Catered Affair, with Bette Davis and Ernest Borgnine.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just about a young couple who want to get married and have a small wedding, but unfortunately their parents are, I think, Italian and Irish or something, and that's not possible in those cultures to have a small wedding, I guess, or at least back then. So that was like a really entertaining, quite heartfelt film. The other one, a really cool samurai film I watched called Sword of Doom. It kind of has the bad guy as the main protagonist, and it was like really well done. Looked amazing, great fights, great story, and just like a great kind of performance from the lead actor.
Do you remember who directed it? He's Googling it.
I'm actually on Letterboxd. It was directed by Kihachi Okamoto. I think I'm just reading the name, so hopefully I pronounced it correctly. The lead performer was Tetsuo Nakadai. I've seen him in other kind of films. I think he's in I think he might be in Yojimbo or something like that. He's the bad guy in that too. He's got these really big eyes, and he just like makes a great villain. Just another film. I guess I need a third one. You can pat yourself on the back for this, I guess. Le Bonheur. I'm sorry for the pronunciation, but that's my inability to speak French. The Agnès Varda film, that was pretty great, very upsetting. And I paused it at the exact wrong moment.
Yes.
If you're ever watching a film and you decide to pause it, had the film ended where I paused it, it would have just been like, I don't understand why. It was just about a bunch of people, living their lives. But yeah, that film went places.
Did you eat popcorn while you watched it?
I didn't eat popcorn while I watched it, no.
That's an inside joke for the listeners.
We're not.
I'm sure I would love to tell the story, but
inappropriate films to eat popcorn at. It could be a whole podcast in itself.
Well, those are all good 3 recommendations. The second one, the samurai one, I haven't seen yet. I'm not huge on samurai films.
Yeah, if you're not, I think it's an amazing looking film, and I mean, I haven't seen that many either. I've just seen kind of the main stuff that everybody would have seen.
Yeah, the Kurosawa stuff.
Yeah, I just like the sound of it because it sounded like a Mike Mignola comic or something like that, like Sword of Doom. So I literally watched it because of the title.
I'd like to get into more samurai stuff.
Yeah, I mean they're essentially westerns, and you love westerns, so
I do love westerns.
yeah. I mean they're just westerns that look different, really.
Well, thanks for explaining what a samurai film is for the
I'm here
listeners
to
and
I'm here to
myself.
mansplain.
I really appreciate it. Let's get into the tagline of the film that we're talking about today. There's a few taglines, but this is the one that I like the most. Then we'll get into some facts.
Mhm.
I know you claim that you have an interesting fact. Chances are I might have it, but if I don't,
I'm gonna be
please tell me.
surprised if you have this fact that I have. It's
Okay.
It's only mind blowing, really, for like you, probably,
For me.
and your dad if he's listening. Your dad actually would be like crazy. Is it the
Okay.
same fact?
I don't know. Now I don't know. Now I don't think so. Tagline for the 1978 film Straight Time is, please God, don't let him get caught. I think it's pretty good.
It's from the I guess the female character's perspective, that tagline. Yeah, I guess, I mean, the first time I saw this film, I saw it with you.
Yes.
We saw it at the Review Cinema in Toronto.
Yes.
You'd seen it already, I believe, as you
I'd seen it a few times before,
reminding me constantly that you'd already seen it because you're more of a cinephile. Yeah, how many times had you seen it? You'd seen it a few times, right?
I'd seen it a few times. The very first time I'd watched it was, and hopefully this doesn't offend any listeners, but I watched it because I'm a really big Harry Dean Stanton fan. He's my favorite actor, and saw he did a film with Dustin Hoffman, who I really like. It was impossible to find, so I had to Pirate Bay it. And I remember watching it in my bed in Dublin and just on my laptop because they obviously didn't have a TV. Well, hey, I mean, I do own a copy of it now. Yeah, it wasn't released.
See, so piracy works in those regards. Sometimes it introduces you to new things that you wouldn't have been able to find otherwise.
The time that we saw it together was the very first time I saw it in a cinema. I didn't think I'd ever be able to see this film in a cinema, and the screening was packed. I was shocked.
And it looked amazing. I mean, I'd never even heard of it until I think we saw a trailer for it during another film, and I'd never even heard of it. Yeah,
no,
which is crazy.
It's not factual. That's not factual.
What's not factual?
What you just said, that you had never heard of Straight Time before, and you just said that I talked to you about it all the time, and I've definitely told you about it.
No, I was saying you've talked to me. Reminded me that you'd seen it multiple times before.
Okay, well, I will cut most of this out, but I will say that that's not factual because I did tell you about it several times. But
yeah,
it's fine. The listeners don't need to hear all that. Okay, are you ready for some facts?
I am ready.
There's quite a few, but I'm going to try and rapid fire. So the first one is Hoffman was denied final cut and sued Warner Brothers for the treatment of the film. I'm wondering what his final cut was, because I think this one looks like the story ends perfectly. I think there was something with the ending that they changed that he didn't like, but this is the only ending I've ever seen, obviously, so I don't know. But I'm wondering what it was, enough for him to sue them for the treatment of the film in its entirety.
It was just the ethics of it, I guess. Maybe he just felt strongly
probably
about it. I guess there is some stuff in the film that we'll probably get into where you're kind of like, I mean, I kind of like that they leave stuff unsaid, but there's certain things where you're kind of like that didn't kind of go anywhere. Or, there's loose ends that maybe are kind of obvious that maybe could have been added scenes or something like that.
Kind of, but I feel like that's like the 70s, right? Where they were able to do that.
Yeah. I mean, there's the one scene, just to skip ahead, there's the one scene where he's introduced to this young kid who's the brother of somebody he knows, but that kind of just goes away. But yeah.
I thought, well, we'll get into that later because I feel like I read that differently, but
yeah, I did read something about it afterwards where he was using it as like a way to distract, but yeah.
Hoffman had only really done some pre-production directing, and only the first couple of days, and realized he couldn't do it. He couldn't direct himself. So then he called Ulu Grosbard, who he'd worked with before, and replaced him. I know when a lot of people talk about this film, they say that Hoffman co-directed it, but he didn't really do anything that's on screen that we saw. He didn't direct any of those things, but he did try and take over, and that's why they kind of had a falling out. where he was trying to like, you should do it this way.
Yeah, I think in the editing as well, he kind of took over and kind of kicked him out of the room, sort of style, which happens sometimes. Edward Norton was famous for that, right? During American History X and a couple other films. I think he tried to take over from the director and edit the film himself.
Yeah, that's actors for you. Jake Busey, who plays Gary Busey's son, is his actual son.
Mm-hmm.
He went on to do some acting, but I did like
really?
that it was his actual son. They kind of look alike.
He's good. Yeah,
he's great.
He was good.
Emmett Walsh, one of his first appearances on film was as an extra on the bus in Midnight Cowboy, which is obviously starring Dustin Hoffman. I thought that was cool. Hoffman prepared for this role as Max Dembo by visiting Folsom Prison. Even though the film is predominantly set outside of the prison, Hoffman just wanted to experience the conditioning of, jail life and the atmosphere in order to create a well-rounded character who had been released from prison after serving 6-year sentence.
I'm sure the inmates love that.
I'm sure that happens quite often with actors.
I'm sure
I need to see, what your life is like. I don't know how I feel about that.
Actors just spending a few days in jail to sort of, oh, this is terrible. Okay, well, bye.
It's shot entirely on location in LA. You don't really get as often anymore because I know it's super expensive to shoot in LA. So I feel like after the 80s, you're seeing a lot of films that are set in LA that might not actually, take place in LA.
Yeah.
This film inspired Tarantino films, Reservoir Dogs and Jackie Brown. I could definitely see it in the Jackie Brown.
All of them, I think. Yeah, definitely.
One of my last facts, and I'll pass it over to you if this is not the one. In the intro, I listed off some writers. There's one whose name is you would probably recognize if you've watched films. And when you see in the credits, if you're watching the film, you're not going to see this man's name there. This man's name there. Yeah. And because he was uncredited. So Michael Mann was one of the 3 writers who worked on the script for the movie.
Which makes a lot of sense when you hear it. Yeah.
He wrote an original draft with Bunker. Mann worked with Bunker for 3 months, during which time he visited Folsom Prison and interviewed several inmates who had known Bunker during his time there. Mann's draft of the script was written when Dustin Hoffman was slated to direct the film. But then when Ulu Grosbard took over as director, he hired 2 other writers to rewrite Mann's script. So those ones that we see got writing credits. Michael Mann did not. I mean, I'm a huge Mann fan. I could see...
You're a manimal.
Yes. I guess.
That's what his fans are called. I just made that up, but I think it might take off. Yeah, Manimals.
Sure. I mean, he's got a new one coming out, so
bring it up there. The Manimals are going to be in a frenzy.
But I could definitely, although it seems obviously his script is fully rewritten, but I could definitely see him writing and directing a film like this.
Yeah, it's definitely got his vibes, if not his questionable sort of female character as well, where you're like, what's going on with this woman? I heard different things about there's an adaptation of the script and then Mann wrote a version of it or something, and I heard different things, but yeah, those are none of the facts.
Okay,
that fact I did have, but the one I have is not that.
Okay, so it's your turn now. Surprise me.
All right, so most of my facts are about Edward Bunker himself, who wrote it while he was in prison. And he appears in the film as well. He's the fixer. He's the guy who with the mustache, and he comes in to get the job off him, which is a really interesting role. I also read that Michael Mann used Bunker as a consultant on some of his films, and he was a consultant on Heat. And the John Voight character is based on Edward Bunker. Danny Trejo, the actor Danny Trejo, is godfather to his son because they met in Folsom Prison. They were bunkies or whatever you call it. He also was in Reservoir Dogs.
Bunkie.
He had a monkey. He was in Reservoir Dogs. He was in Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs. He's Mr. Blue.
He was.
And he was the youngest inmate ever at San Quentin at age 19. That's a nice thing. That's a nice record. That's not my big fact, though. My big fact is that when he got out of prison and straight time happened and all that, in the early 90s, he opened a taxi service in Kingston, Ontario.
What?
Which is where you're from. Just outside Kingston. Yeah, so in the 90s, he ran a taxi company in Kingston, and it got bought out. It's now Amy's. It's still under
I know Amy's.
Yeah. So it's now under the control of whoever was that taxi company, but they bought Edward Bunker out. So you might have been in a car with Or maybe your dad was in a car with Edward Bunker. Who knows?
Was he driving also, or did he just own?
I mean, I assume he might have done some trips, you know? I don't
Maybe.
know. When he got started, it was a small taxi company. So yeah. How's that for a fact?
That's a pretty good fact. That's not something I would have ever assumed.
Yeah. I don't know why he was in Kingston, Ontario for a few years. Who knows? But
There's a huge prison there, so let's talk about someone whose life choices are not the best. But we'll talk about, do you think he's a good guy? Do you think he's not? So let's get into straight time. I have a few points I want to go over. We can go back and forth. You can bring up whatever. But where I wanted to start was kind of the way Grosbard shoots the characters. Grosbard and co. shoots the characters as everyday people, because no one in this film seems like they're out of the ordinary. They just look like regular people you would see off the street. They're living.
yeah, it feels very lived in.
No one feels like, oh, this is a movie character. It just feels, even Max Dembo, like there's people who live lives like that. And you never question that he is genuine. So I'm going to read a quick quote from the New York Times on their description of Max. Max is shrewd, self-absorbed, tough, and superficial ways and doomed. He defines the meaning of recidivism. In real life, you wouldn't trust him to hang up your coat. So I think that's a very harsh reading of Max.
Yeah.
He does come out of prison with the greatest of intentions, but life is not good to people who've been in jail for whatever reason. Sometimes that's with good reason. Like, you shouldn't be treated like everyone else. Like, and sometimes if it's like he just robbed a place, like he's done his time, but it's hard for him to get a job. He is not allowed to drive. He's not allowed to handle money. So there's only certain jobs that he can get, and he has his parole officer on his ass. So how do you feel about the way, or how do you view Max versus the way the writer for New York Times does, versus for me, how I view him?
I think it's a really interesting question, and I've watched this film 3 times in the last probably 18 months, and my view has definitely switched a little bit. I think I definitely felt what you felt the first time I watched it, for sure. And then having watched Le Bonheur recently, I've stopped trusting male characters in films, and I started looking at it from a slightly different perspective.
Yeah, deservedly so.
I actually think, having watched it this time, I had a different take on Max completely. I don't think he want to go straight. That's I guess the question is, like, I don't think he necessarily does. I think all of the things, even though his parole officer is obviously a huge, massive, power hungry dickhead, but he is, right from the off, he's pushing to see what he can get away with. He's always pushing to see what he can get away with. Even when he's like at the restaurant with the girl on the date, he's like, he's kind of bragging about, prison and stuff like that. And there's stuff throughout the film where, especially when he goes to meet the Edward Bunker character, you realize he's more famous. He's more of a crook than maybe you were led to believe necessarily. He was definitely more well known. He seems to be like a respected criminal. He hates the parole officer, but he doesn't really rage against like the injustice of it all or anything like that. He kind of, one of the things I read in a review was that he understands that the world is crooked, and he's just trying to beat the system. He's just trying to see what he can get away with. And I think as the film goes on and you see him with Harry Dean Stanton and the way he kind of uses his friends, I mean, the Gary Busey character is just very sad and tragic. This is a guy who's a drug addict. He's getting his life together. He's a, relatively good father. He clearly has a temper, but he's able to get it under control. There's that great scene where he kind of apologizes to the son after kind of losing it with him a little bit. The wife is walking on eggshells with him a little bit, but he brings everybody back into the game. He brings everybody back into that life. Harry Dean Stanton, as much as he wants to get out of it, he's got a pretty good setup where he is. I mean, and it's Max Denbo goes, and I think his behavior through the film is pretty abhorrent when you look at it from that perspective. I mean, he gets this young girl that he's kind of romancing. He brings her into the store, she's maybe under the impression he's going to buy her something nice, and he's casing the joint, and which means he's involving her in the crime.
Yeah,
I mean, he's got her now like as an accomplice against her will, and he does this again and again, and he, the whole like him pushing things, he's constantly pushing things. So even with the parole officer, who's not a nice character at all, but he's probably dealt with guys like this his entire career, and he's like, why is this guy already pushing? Like right from the off, he doesn't go to the hotel he's supposed to go to. He goes somewhere else.
Yeah.
why would you do that on your first night? Why would you do something that you know is going to get you into shit? And I think he says something like, I called, which I think he did call or whatever. But I mean, it kind of culminates with the end where when they're robbing the bank and then the store, and Max pushes things. He's there for longer than he wants to be. Harry Dean Stanton's doing that great, let's get out of here, man, kind of speech. When they go to the jewelry store, he takes even longer. I mean, they've already had that incident where he's taken too long at the bank. And then he goes and he does it again. And he blames kind of Gary Busey for it. But they tell Gary Busey, when the alarm goes off, we're going to be this long. I think he leaves when he hears the alarm goes off. I think he says that later on. He admits that he just gets scared and runs. I mean, he would have gone anyway. He would have left anyway because he told him leave after the alarm goes off at a certain point, and he takes extra long time to smash everything and steal more stuff. And he gets his friend killed. And then he's kind of involved everybody in his life into this life of crime. So yeah, I don't know. This viewing, I had a very different view of Max. I think that maybe I don't know if he ever intended to go straight, I guess, is the question.
I don't know. I think that's a good point. Everything you're saying is valid. It's dependent on the person, right? So I'm viewing it as kind of feeling sorry for him.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why, like, he did not need to do any of these things. I think that and this ties into the very last sequence where you see the mugshots throughout the time. And you can see that he's been in prison since he was a kid, essentially.
Exactly.
So he doesn't know any other life. And maybe at this last 6-year stint, he realized, hey, maybe I don't want to come back here, and tried and realized it just doesn't make sense because he doesn't know how to live any other life. So instead of being an adult about it, he just was like, well, this is easier. And he's very self-absorbed, obviously, because, as he said, he's taking in people who, yes, they're willing participants, but he didn't need to involve them. Same with Jenny. He involves her before that because he's staying at her place and he's run out on his parole. So they're obviously looking for him, and she'll get in trouble if they find him at her house. I don't know if we want to shift to Jenny now. I always hear different things about Jenny.
I mean, I think it's a really good performance. I don't know if it's intentionally done. I mean, it's kind of like, what is her deal? There's this young, attractive woman. She's just started a new job. Obviously, she doesn't like it very much, but that's fine. She's got a new job. She's got a pretty good place. She seems like she's a very neat and tidy person. I mean, it's like, why is she with this guy? He doesn't like, seduce her in a sort of like manipulative way. She just seems kind of lonely. And I wonder, is that all it is that they're just kind of saying that these are lonely people. They don't have support systems, regardless of whether they're criminals or not. That's how they kind of find each other.
I think
I know.
Exactly
how do you feel about the character? It's a good role, and I think she does really well with it. But you could also accuse it of being sort of, what would you say?
I don't know.
Sexist. Sort of like she doesn't have any agency, or she's just kind of going along. Or
yeah, I don't read it that way, and I think it's especially due to Teresa Russell's performance. Who's great in it.
Yeah,
I think this is a girl who's on the surface seems to have everything together. She kind of looks like a very straight-laced. Like, she's not wearing anything that's even remotely attractive. She lives on her own. I don't know if she owns this place she's renting. Doesn't matter. She lives on her own. She has her own car and has a job. So why would she be attracted to this person? And I see when I read about people's thoughts on her, they're like, why is she just okay with this? But I think it's that she's lonely, and we don't know anything of her background, right? We don't know. Some people just have like a craving for something a little dangerous that's outside of their world. And I think it's that. I think she found him attractive, and she was like, this could be fun. There is that scene where they're talking and she's like, how long are you going to be doing this? And he's like, I am doing this one big job. That's it. I can't tell you anymore. You shouldn't get involved in it. I just never questioned the fact that she would be into someone like that. Because just because someone has their life together doesn't mean mentally she's all put together. Yeah,
she says so little about herself, I guess.
But so do the other characters too, though.
That's true. Yeah, that's the thing. That's what I like, though. That everybody's sort of like they're all kind of like sketches to a certain degree. They exist in the vacuum of the movie, and you don't get a lot of like background. You get hints of like Harry Dean Stanton, and he's got a job. I mean, he's got a full-time job and a wife and a nice house and a swimming pool. And, this guy just loves committing crimes. But I think the initial scene between Hoffman and Russell, I think that's where the kind of key lies, where he's just like honest with her. He just tells her the truth, which is that, he really needs a job. He's trying to get it all together. Maybe he believes that at the time. I think maybe he does. And then the next scene you have them in where they're having dinner and she helps him pay for it. And I think,
No, but I think that translates into like his life outside of prison. He doesn't look like someone who would be a leader, who would be able to conduct something on his own, but he is leading all these people astray.
Yeah.
Right. So
sure.
he is the one who's pulling their strings and getting them out of their comfort lives to be like, well, you're comfortable, but you could be, making more money.
Kathy Bates sees him for who he is. She knows that he's going to get the husband in trouble. And the other interesting scene I found was when he's trying to convince Harry Dean Stanton to do the next job, the bank job, not the bank job, the jewelry store. And Harry Dean Stanton doesn't want to do it because it's in Beverly Hills. There's too many cops, all logical reasons for not wanting to do it. It's too loud. He's just kind of playing Harry Dean Stanton's character. He's like, and in that scene, I was like, they kind of come across like they're addicts, like they're junkies. And Harry Dean Stanton just wants to fix. He doesn't really care as much about the reward. He cares more about the thrill of doing it and
it's
the thrill of doing the job.
Because he makes enough money, clearly. I think he owns the shop that he
owns the shop. I think he's the boss anyway. Yeah. And I think Max Denbo, it might not be the same reason he's doing it. I don't know exactly, but I think he sees that that's the reason Harry Dean Stanton does it, and he plays it, and he says, this is going to be good. Like, this is going to be, and that's what convinces Harry Dean Stanton to go ahead with it, even though he's got his reservations because he's been in two situations now with Max Denbo where things have gone wrong. There's the heist that didn't happen, the poker game heist that didn't happen, and then there was the bank job that he kind of went too far with the time and stuff like that. So you can see Harry Dean Stanton has like reservations about going along with this guy.
I mean, I love the script for this film. I think it's really good. And there's a line from what you were referring to that I was going to mention later, but I'll just say it now. In terms of the Beverly Hills jewelry shop gig, Jerry, who's played by Harry Dean, says, I don't know about Beverly Hills. It scares the shit out of me. And Max goes, fuck Beverly Hills.
Real punk rock thing to say, yeah.
I also wouldn't want to be robbing Beverly Hills out of any place in LA.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even go into the shops at Beverly Hills, let alone want to go rob.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Even when they're casing the store, I mean, he's kind of taking the piss a little bit. He goes obviously towards something and says it's the bathroom. Why would they have a bathroom at a jewelry store? And the guy is like, what are you doing? Like, what's happening here? Yeah, there's an element of Max that I think, does he want to get caught? Does he want to see how far he can get before he gets caught? And it's like a game.
I think it's like, that.
How much can I do before they're going to get me? Because they're going to get me.
I mean, clearly, because he's been in and out of jail since he was a teenager.
That's his life. That's who he is.
We have been talking about the crimes in the film and the different jobs, but I think the Street Time is overall is much more than just the crimes. The crimes happen and they're a big part of it, but I think the film and the story deep down is just about his moral dilemma along with the other characters. They all know what's happening is not good and have multiple chances to get out of this, but they don't. They're struggling with their morals. So how do you feel about the fact that, this is described as a heist film, and yes, there are heists in it, but it's so much more than just, I think we could have even got away with just having one heist done and you would still get the picture. Yeah. So how do you feel about the moral through line in this film?
I think it's like it's a nature versus nurture kind of. Are these people like this because this is this world they grew up in, or is it just who they are as people? I mean, the Gary Busey character is the only one who kind of decides this is too much. This is kind of, I have something good going. He's a riveter. It's not an easy job, but he's kind of got his family life just about together, and he doesn't want to risk it in the end. He kind of goes along with it, and then he doesn't want to risk it. And he's the only character who sort of seems to have learned something, even though you don't see that happening. But, he's the only one who seems to have like evolved from the past sort of thing. I think the way the film is shot as well is really interesting because he doesn't switch the character moments and everything like that. And then to the heist moments, the camera kind of stays the same. It's almost some of the reviews were saying, it's very kind of dull because the way he shoots it is almost like matter of fact. He doesn't do any crazy angles. Everything is sort of just almost workmanlike, and I don't mean that in a bad way. If Michael Mann was making this film, the heist scenes would be like big productions. And it's almost like Max Denbo walking down the street and making a phone call is the same as him going in and robbing a bank. Yeah. or the scene where he's in the jail is the only time where the camera moves a little bit, and it's just shot very matter of factly. It's shot, everybody's sort of just on point, and I think the way he shoots the characters is he wants them to feel like they're lived in real characters that you would just meet on the street, or you would just maybe come across at some point in your life and not even think about. How do you feel about all that?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why I personally love the film so much, because I like kind of matter of fact shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I don't like when, there's a lot of different camera angles or the camera's kind of helping to create the tension. But like you said, immediately I was like, yeah, this is not a Michael Mann film, and I've already said, I love Michael Mann, but that's his style of being like, okay, the camera's going to get right in there so that you're uncomfortable. But I think this works for this film of just being kind of static, because you kind of just feel like you're standing there in the room and you can't do anything because the camera won't let you look away from what's happening. It's shot all wide shots, and you see the action from everyone as opposed to being like, oh, what are they doing over there? It's like, no, I see everything. I love the fact that it's all shot in LA. LA in this film, kind of in the same vein of, although this is before To Live and Die in LA, but it's the LA that we don't see that often, apart from the scene in Beverly Hills in this film. Usually when you get an LA film, you're getting, the beach, you're getting those specific areas that we all know in LA. But this is just like, there's nothing really LA about it, apart from, the eating outside, the diners outside and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't know really what the time frame is of this, but it seems like it's probably 2 weeks of Max Dembo's life.
Yeah,
maybe
it's not a very
month.
long time anyway. Yeah, maybe I think there's some time between the bank job and the jewelry store. They seem to indicate that there's some time has passed.
But without having the camera, moving around, even in the bank job or the jewelry job, you kind of flash between Max and Jerry because they're on separate islands, but it's not anything other than just cutting in and out.
It just moves with the characters. Yeah.
We're never too close to them when we're watching them, but you're tense because you're like, this is it. Like, they're going to get caught here and there. And whether you're rooting for them to get caught at that point, by the time it gets to the jewelry job, you're like, okay, Max is asking for it. And not that Jerry's not. And maybe because I love Harry Dean, that I don't want him to get caught. But at that point, you're just kind of waiting. You're essentially waiting for the cops to arrive at that point.
Yeah. And there's that look that Harry Dean Stanton gives him, after he gets shot, which is just like, I told you, man. Like, why did you have to do it? We could have gotten away. Mm-hmm. Even if the car had gone, they could have probably still gotten away if they left on time, because the cops took that much longer to get there. The amount of trust in the actor's performance is sort of rare without the kind of snazzy camera work where all you're left with is Dustin Hoffman just being on the screen, and just like, for me, it's his best performance. I think he carries the whole film, and he's amazing with the other actors as well. And he even like Kathy Bates, who has like a small role, does really well. Like everything feels sort of like they're real people. They're just tired. Everybody is just like trying to get ahead. Even the extras in the film are sort of like, the people in the jewelry store in the bank, they're kind of like, this is the world we live in. This is not, nobody's like in hysterics kind of thing. Even the M. Walsh character is maybe the most cartoonish, but even him, like, you've met people like that guy, like that sort of like gross, sort of, cynical guy who's like just causing problems for the sake of causing problems. You want Max to hit that guy, so you're kind of happy.
Yeah, okay. Let's talk about Emmett Walsh for a second. I feel like the way your viewing of Max Dembo changed over time, mine has changed with his character over the last few viewings. Yeah. So immediately, the first few times, you're just like, yeah, I can't deal with this guy. Why is he giving him such a hard time?
Yeah.
After a while, you're kind of like, this man is just doing his job. Is he taking advantage? Yes. Yeah. He's just doing his job. And I think because Max is giving him a hard time, he doesn't like that. And he's like, no, it shouldn't be that way. This shouldn't be the dynamic.
Yeah.
He wants someone who's going to kiss his ass. And he doesn't like that. So then he gets him arrested.
But he also like goes in his room. He sees somebody who's been shooting up in the room. I mean, he does it in a really kind of unnecessary way. But it's also like, he's probably dealt with so many of these kind of people. And he's just like, why should I believe this guy? Because he's Dustin Hoffman. Like, I don't care.
That scene was weird to me because the evidence that's left is like matches. So he could just be smoking. So it's like, does he have it? Does Max have a history of doing drugs? Why it's like in his file, why he'd be looking for that? Or he's just looking for an excuse to get him
I think he's
arrested.
looking for an excuse, yeah. And it's kind of like, it's the way the matches are set up. You set them up like they're standing. So when you're cooking the heroin on the spoon or whatever, he's built a little device for himself. Sorry, I just know it from Train Spotting, stuff like that. So it's just the way the matches are sitting. There's like 4 or 5 matches sitting on the pack. So it's he was cooking something with the matches, sort of thing. So that's the giveaway that he was doing something. And there's a couple of other things that he kind of says and does that make him sort of like questionable to a parole officer who probably wants him to be by the book if you're going to be serious about it. I think that the thing that makes the MMR Walsh character horrific is kind of when he puts him in the prison, okay, fine, whatever. But then he comes back, and when he's getting him released, he's like, oh, I was going to do it on Friday, but I had some stuff on, so I left you here for a weekend. That's when it's kind of like, that's the sort of thing that drives Max over the edge a little bit. He's just like, you could have gotten me out of here a few days earlier.
Yes, I mean, it would drive anyone. And he also didn't need to tell him that.
Yeah, it's a power move.
Then when we get to the scene in the car, they're driving on the highway, which I love a good LA highway scene. And then he kind of takes over, cuffs him to the fence and pantses him. And like, that's played for, comic relief.
Yeah, that looks very real. I mean, that's like actually on the highway. I don't know how they shot that.
I'm sure there was probably people who saw that happening and were like, I don't know what's happening. Because the camera's far enough behind that, like, they clearly were just on the other side of the highway.
I wonder how they shot that, or if they just did it for real and they were like, whatever, let's see what happens.
I don't know. It feels like something they would just do for real.
Yeah. What do you think about the music in the film?
I love it.
I love it. Yeah, it's sort of jaunty.
Well, the score, now even just thinking about it, it's stuck in my head. It's kind of, they only use like 2 songs essentially.
Yeah, it's this kind of weird country sort of twang thing.
Yeah, the saxophone heavy, and it's David Shire who did this. It's very different from like a Dave Grusin film. It's like super piano heavy. Mm-hmm. I like this because it kind of gives it like a weird Western-y vibe too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
This, and he kind of Max has his own theme song, because the one that I'm thinking of, I'm sure you are, is usually when we're following Max.
Yeah, it's at the very start of the movie. Hear it,
and then you hear it again, I think, when he's walking around, and then at the end again. It's like it's Max's theme.
Yeah.
It doesn't really set any tone, because if you're listening to the music and you're thinking, oh, this is going to be a fun time, it's not. I don't know. I love it, how simple it is, and how...
I read about the title a little bit, and just the idea that you do time on the inside and then you do time on the outside, and that's called straight time. Where it's like they're both sentences, and in a way they're both kind of like, it's just one's on the inside, one's on the outside. They're both kind of things that somebody has to go through. Mm-hmm. And the implication is that it ends, so that you're going to end up back in prison, and then you're going to get out, and you're going to go back out again for a while, and then you're going to go back into prison. Because Max has this thing where he thinks that the system's supposed to meet him halfway, I guess, and it's like that's not how it works, I guess.
Especially for like a repeat convict, or repeat offender, I should say. I'm going to ask you, do you have a favorite shot in the film? But before that, I'm just going to read another quote from the same New York Times article, which will lead me to my favorite scene. So they say, Straight Time is not a movie to raise the spirits. It is so cool it would leave a chill were it not done with such precision and control that we remain fascinated by our rat in spite of ourselves. So I think that ties into what you were saying about Max. The film is not trying to force you to root any sort of way for this man. I don't think it's trying to make you hate him. I don't think it's trying to make you like him. It's just kind of matter of fact. And I think that's what's so chilling about it, which leads me to my favorite scene, which has always been from the very start, the first time I watched this till this recent watch. It's a scene when we first meet Harry Dean's character. Sure. At that point, especially for me, I was like, oh, where's Harry Dean? It's like an hour into this film. He hasn't come up yet. They're having food by the pool. The wife's there as well. The wife brings out a guitar for Harry Dean to sing. And I love a good Harry Dean singing scene. He starts a song and the camera's like leveled to them. And then it cuts and we're above them now. And the camera pans out. And then that's when you're like, okay, stuff's going to get real.
That's one of the only kind of fancy shots in the film as well.
Yeah. I love that scene though. I love the way that's shot. I absolutely would steal it for my film. And it's not that it's like the very first time anyone's done that, but I like the way that brings you now into the second half of the film where we're getting, because prior to that, there were no crimes committed.
Yeah.
I can't remember if he had committed the crime in the convenience store just before that to get some petty cash.
Yeah, the convenience store.
Or it might have been like right after that scene where he meets Jerry. It might have been right before.
I think I think that scene happens right after the Emmett Walsh scene where he locks him up on the highway. And then I think he's like, well, now I'm on the run. I need some money. I'm immediately going to go get a gun. And then I'm going to go rob a store. And then I'm going to get somebody to help me out with a bigger robber.
Do you have a favorite scene?
I mean, I thought you were going to say the shower scene. So that was going to be, my favorite scene was going to be the burger and song scene. So.
The scene, because I haven't even mentioned yet. I was keeping that. Get to see a bit of Dustin Hoffman dick.
That
scene is dark though.
It is dark. I don't
see a bunch of people.
But all those guys are like definitely like they're all repeat offenders. Every single one of them like knows the system.
Yeah,
you know exactly what they need to do. The thing I find interesting about the Harry Dean Stanton scene is any other movie would just cut that out. They would just cut the song out. They'd be like, oh, we can shave literally like 2 minutes off the film here if we cut this out. And for me, it's like that's what makes the film so unique, is that they're willing to stay with that character and just play a song, and the actors just sit there and they listen to it and they're kind of having a good time.
Because the song really has nothing to do with anything other than the fact that I'm sure Grosbard and maybe even Hoffman were like, we know that you can do this. Do you want to do it? Because who doesn't want to watch Harry Dean play a song?
It's not like an indication of what's going to happen or anything like that.
No.
It's just sort of.
I think the camera panning out is an indication, but the song itself is not.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Jerry for a bit. Also, as I mentioned several times now, Harry Dean's my favorite actor. When he comes up, it kind of brings the life back into the film a bit, because at some point you're kind of like, okay, what's happening here? He has, done that one little petty crime, but what's happening? Once we get Harry Dean, we get a whole other side of Max. And he's like, oh, this is my old buddy. And the wife leaves to go get the guitar or whatever. And he says, get me out of this. It's like, it's kind of funny.
Yeah. It's also with the appearance of Jerry, not him himself, but like you kind of start seeing who Max really is. I mean, he immediately knows what to do. I don't know if he's already kind of planned ahead in prison that he's going to do this, I think he just knows that he at one point is going to have to do what he has to do, which is that you have to have a car, you have to have money, you have to have somebody to do a job with, you have to have a setup. He knows where to go to get a gun, he knows where to go to get a job. He knows all the kind of people he needs to do whatever it is that he needs to do. The only complication for him is the girl, is Teresa Russell. And he's expecting her to be like, I'm out. And when she doesn't, I think he's kind of taken aback a little bit. And he kind of feels like he owes her something, maybe, that this is the first person who's ever sort of stuck with him. And I think that's what makes the film, that gives it its kind of humanity right there. But we have the same favorite scene, unfortunately.
Well, no, I mean, it's just a great scene. It's, I don't know, there's something about it that I always look forward to it when it's coming up. I kind of quickly talked about the script, seeing as the script kind of went through different people. I think the final product is great. And there's another line that I really like from Manny, who's played by Sandy Barron. And this is the guy, I don't know if he owns the club, or it looks like he probably owns it, the club. And that's when Max asks him about the guns, and he says he owes him. So they obviously have worked together. And he's telling him about this poker gig that he can go rob. And Manny says, I'll take you out there, but I'm not going to rob it for you. I've got a bad stomach, no guts. And that line, I just love it. That's
such a film noir kind of line.
It is, but he says it in kind of a, matter of fact kind of way, just to be like, I'll tell you about this, but I'm not going to go there with you. Like, this is your job. You find your own people. I will get you the guns.
It's also very real that, like, there's criminals who know their limits. They're just, some of them just, they don't want to deal with guns, or they don't, they're kind of, they do small time stuff because they don't want to do big time stuff. They, that sort of feels very like real and very, Edward Bunker was a consultant on the film and everything like that. So he obviously knew a lot of criminals, and I
just like the way everyone speaks in this film. It never seems like it's flashy. It just is the way people talk to each other. I think that's a great script, and just ties into the way the film is shot and the characters. Because even when Jenny and Max are interacting, nothing seems over the top. There's a scene where they're just kind of staring at each other in the quiet, because they're trying to figure out how to go from he's robbed a place, she finds out about it, they're looking in each other's eyes to figure out, is she going to be with me through this? And she's trying to figure out, can I trust this man?
It's only at the end when he stops making eye contact with her that she knows that they're not going together, kind of thing. They're in the diner or whatever, and he's avoiding kind of looking at her. Yeah. How do you feel about the Gary Busey character?
He's another one that also, I think that's why the strength in this film is how rewatchable it is, because there's I guess there's a couple of spoilers in this film that we will get to. We've already mentioned, and first couple of times I was like, this guy's annoying. He seems like he's like drugged out.
Yeah, he's a bit whiny, which is what a lot of junkies are like, I guess. Yeah.
But then as I watch it, you kind of feel bad for him because he was working a job. He went straight, has a family, and was happy to go straight in that way. He's obviously still doing drugs.
Yeah.
Clearly. So he would have gotten himself into some sort of trouble at some point. But you feel...
It's kind of shocking when you see him take those drugs. Yeah, it's like, oh, okay, straight. Like the first chance he gets, he's like, all right, let's do it. But that's probably very true to life. Every viewing I've had, I've felt really bad for the Gary Busey character. I think he's a guy who's trying to get his life together, and it's like his wife is stuck with him, his kid is stuck with him. He obviously loves them both. He's probably not going to be able to do it. It's so kind of sad what happens at the end, I think, and how his like how he looks up to Max Denbo. He's like, he's almost like his hero a little bit. He's got like kind of a hero thing with him. He knows that he's sort of messed up the job, but like they're friends, so it's like whatever, they're both still there. It'll be fine. Max goes to the house. Just we're just gonna spoil the film if you haven't watched it. So you should watch it before listening to this. Probably he goes to the house to kill him. I mean, it's premeditated. It's not something that he just thought about. He goes actively to kill him.
Yeah,
and he kills him in his house where his family are. I mean, his family are gonna find him. It's just,
I'm sure they heard the shot.
It's so sad, and the way he does it is so sad. It's just...
Before we get into that specific scene there, I do want to talk about something you were mentioning about Willie, who's Gary Busey's character. There's like a innocence to him that plays across as being clueless. I don't know what he went to jail for. I highly doubt it was for a robbery. It might have been for drugs. Who knows? He doesn't seem like he was in there long enough to have not wanted to, get his life straight after, which he was trying to do. Drug addiction is something that's difficult to beat, and he seems like he's trying his best, whatever his best is. I remember the first time I watched this, I was like, why would he go right back to his house? And the more you watch it, you're like, oh, he just assumed that he got caught, so he could just go home. Because if I had run off on someone, I would be like, I can't go back to my house. This guy's going to come after me and be pissed off. And he's doing something in his garage. It's not like he's hiding from him. And then when he sees him, he was like, and they trust him enough to think that Max is being genuine when he's like, don't worry, it's okay. And he pulls him in for a hug. And that's when he shoots him. I know you were sort of talking about that, but do you want to talk about, how you feel, how his character came to an end?
I feel like Willie's just one of those guys who kind of is almost like Arrested Development, where he was like, he was a young guy. He, did little petty crimes with his friends and stuff like that. And he just kind of became a drug addict, but he's got that kind of an almost innocent mentality where he's sort of like a little kid as well, with his kid as well. He's sort of like a young teenage boy mentality but he's in a real world. He's in like a world of like violence and stuff like that. And the world is not nice to those people. And I think him being a drug addict is just, I don't think he has the capacity to deal with sort of the real world.
Yeah.
And he needs his family to help him along. And that's what they're doing. And it's only when Max gets involved in his life and he's got this sort of like friendship loyalty thing, because he's got loyalty to him. And that's why he's helping him out. That's why he helps him with the bed. That's why he gives him the car. I mean, he just comes and takes his car.
Yeah.
And he's just like, he just like walks in, takes the car and leaves. Willie's fixing the car at the time. He's just like, oh yeah, no worries. And it's sort of pathetic in the actual like real sense of the word, where it's sad. I think in the last scene, I don't know. I just think about how kind of cold-blooded it is, really, to do it like that.
What I like about the film as well is that it treats the audience with enough respect for us to just figure out what's going on without just being like, oh, let's get a flashback to their time in jail so we can understand why their dynamic is like this, why he has this loyalty to him. We can just be like, well, Max probably helped him out when he was there, probably took care of him while he was there.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. It might have been like they might have known each other in prison too. He might have helped him out in prison, which definitely
they did.
Just reading the book and stuff. Oh, okay, yeah.
Well, they do mention they were in prison together. They mentioned they were there together. I don't know what their dynamic was, but obviously they were friends there. That leads us to now another character who essentially bites the dust. We've talked about the last heist scene in the jewelry store. Max is pushing it, is getting more jewelry. Jerry's like, come on, we got to go. The alarm's now on. We got to go. The car's not there, so they're on the run. Max makes it over the fence, and just as Jerry's trying to get over the fence, he gets shot by a cop. His ending is just really sad. It really is Max's fault. Yes, Jerry didn't need to do this job. He could have just said no. But if Max hadn't stayed those extra minute or so, they maybe could have gotten away. Maybe they didn't, or it could have been Max who got shot. How do you feel about the way his character comes to an end?
It's heartbreaking because you think, oh, they're going to get away, or he's going to get away, and maybe they'll chase down Max. And I think what the film does really well is that in those moments, like with Willie and with Jerry, during their death scenes, you do think about the moments where they kind of show their humanity. You think about him playing the song, and you think about Willie with his kid at the dinner table, and it's kind of like the loss that they've suffered because of this, and And I think Max going up to him, he doesn't really know what to say to him. He's just like, that's what's going to happen, I guess.
Yeah.
And I love that look that Harry Dean Stanley gives him. I think that's a great kind of. He doesn't say anything. He just sort of was like, shit,
Yeah.
This didn't need to happen. It sucks that it happened, but it's also like almost like an acceptance of this was going to happen at some point. Let's be honest, because that's the life they lead.
Something you did say about, we see those moments of their actual lives. That's another thing why I love this film so much, because we don't need flashbacks to give us information about these characters. We can just see, and in those two scenes, the one with, Willie and his kid and his wife, and Jerry and his wife, those both take place in the homes, whether it's even outside of their home or inside of the home. And I think that's really important to be like, these are people who have stable lives. And Max is the interrupter. He's the one who's creating chaos in whatever normalcy that they had. And that's why those scenes take place in their homes. And we don't need to have flashbacks to be like, oh, how did Jerry and Max meet? How did Jerry or Willie and Max meet? Because it's not important.
And what they're doing is like a sense of loyalty to their friend, or maybe somebody who helped them in prison. And Max is just sort of using. He doesn't need to call either of those guys up. That scene with Harry Dean Stanley is very funny though, when he's like, get me out of here,
Yeah. He's saying that because he wants like a little fix, but like you could see with each job. And even at the end of the heist, the jewelry shop, he's like, this is the last time, man. I'm not doing this anymore because now you've messed me over 3 times.
The implication, there is an implication that he stays an extra long time to get the watch for Teresa Russell.
Yes. It is.
I don't believe that, to be honest. But you would just go there first then. Just take the watch.
I think he's like, he saw the watch and he remembered it. I don't think
maybe
he gets it for her, but he's
thing.
just like,
he's smashing other stuff before that too. Like he's taking longer. Yeah. Even before he was reminded of that, he's taking longer.
Well, do we want to talk about Jenny and her ending? First of all, she's in the car waiting for him when he goes to kill Willie.
Yeah, again, an accomplice. Yeah. Like there's no way she's going to be able to tell a court of law that she didn't know what was going on at that point.
Anyway, so then they drive off and she's like, where are we going? And then they turn on the radio. She hears about the crime. She immediately knows he's involved in it. And then she wants to get out of the car. She's sick to her stomach. They go to it. And that's where he shows some bit of empathy, where he's like, I've taken you too far now. You have a chance to get out. No one knows that we know each other. So he leaves her at the diner and asks when the next bus is for her to get back to LA. Yeah. And she's like, you're just going to leave me here. And I think she's kind of protesting it because she's like, well, how could you just leave me after all of this? But there's a sense of relief in her eyes where she's like, okay, well, I didn't have to leave you. You're leaving me.
Yeah. She has an out and she should probably take it. I think when the reality sets in of what he's done, I think they might have said on the radio that a police officer was killed. I can't remember, but like when the reality sets in, she probably feels like it's too late for her to get out. But even though it's not, like, she's not really connected to anything. It's like she hasn't met any of these friends or anything like that. It's really the only kind of non-selfish thing that Max does in the film, really, is to send her away. You could also say that he's less likely to get caught if he's by himself. I guess if you want to be
that too, because like he could see that she's already trying to get out of it. Yeah. In a sense, what's going to stop her from trying to leave later on, and then she tells this is where he's going.
It's got shades of Badlands there at the end with,
Mhm.
how's this film going to end? How's it's going to end? Maybe in a shootout for Max. So
Yeah, and then after that, which leads us now to Max's end, he leaves and he's just driving. And in the film, that's the end. The last scenes that we get are 3 different mugshots
yeah,
from Max Dembo, ranging from, I think the age for his first one was 18 or 19 to
yeah.
like somewhere in his 20s to now.
Is the last mugshot post that scene where
That's
he's got the
that I was going
beard,
to ask
or
you about that. I think the very first 2 times I thought this was the previous one where he just got out.
yeah,
But I think
yeah,
the last one is to be like he got caught again.
he got caught. Yeah,
They don't explicitly say it. They're leaving it to the viewer to figure that out. And that's another thing I love. But the more I watch it, I'm like, no, this has got to be the final one after he got caught after this job. To be like, we don't need to show you he's gotten caught by the cops, this and that. We've already shown you enough. We're not trying to make it bigger than it is. We're just going to show you this mugshot to be like, this is that was his end. And then we're showing you he's done it before. He's likely going to do it again. Now he's committed a murder, so I'm sure he's going to be in jail for a little bit longer than 6 years.
yeah.
But how do you feel about that? How we don't really get a visual end other than that cue, that mugshot.
I mean, I love it. I love seeing Dustin Hoffman's, 17-year-old mugshot or whatever, what age he is in that mugshot. And to see him age through and just the kind of repetitiveness of that kind of lifestyle. I mean, he rides off into the sunset, doesn't he? That's essentially what's happening. It's not a happy ending, but it's like a lot of those kind of Randolph Scott westerns and stuff like that have like a much darker ending, and they always ride off into the sunset, but it's sort of like it's not like a positive sort of thing like it might be in a John Wayne movie kind of thing. I think he realizes the world doesn't care about rehabilitation. The world that he lives in, that the world, which is the real world, I guess. They're trying to say that people don't care about if you're a crook, you're a crook, and the sooner you accept it, the better off you're going to be, because the world doesn't care about rehabilitation of criminals or anything like that. It's really just about punishment, crime and punishment. Max knows that. He sees it for what it is. He's just going to do what he can do to kind of get by.
Well, that's exactly that. That's why they're doing straight time after it. You're still being punished afterwards. Otherwise, they would just release you and you could be, okay, bye. I'm going to go live my life. I mean, I don't want to get into the politics of that because I have my thoughts, but there's a reason why they cannot just let you live a regular life right after.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's not understanding why. He's like, I've done the time. Why can't I just move on?
It's not really freedom. I mean, you're just surrounded by freedom, other people being free, but you're kind of shackled to.
Okay, so I think that's straight time. I think we've covered it, and I hope that you've watched it before you listen to this. Or if not, I hope this inspires you to watch it because it truly is a film that will stick with you. I don't think I've met anyone who has seen this film who doesn't like it, and they're always shocked as to why they hadn't heard about it before.
Yeah.
And why it's not more widely talked about or available. So that's straight time. I don't know if it's streaming on anything, but sure, you can hit me up if you need a link. I do have a hard copy, but I can.
Yeah, what's the hard copy? Is it a Warner Brothers thing or is it a?
I can't remember if it's Kino or if it's Warner.
Yeah, it's good. If it wasn't expensive either. So if you're looking to buy it, should be able to buy it.
Yes, 100%. So this brings us to end credits. Usually I ask 2 questions. I'm only going to ask one of them because neither of us have seen. I've only seen maybe Ulu Grosbard doesn't have a huge filmography. I think I've only seen one other of his films. The name is escaping me, but it was like De Niro and Meryl Streep. It's like a romantic comedy. It was okay.
Oh, really?
So I'm going to skip if you think this would be a starter film. I'm going to go to...
Sorry, it was called Falling in Love.
Yes, it was on Criterion last year.
He made a bunch of De Niro films, True Confessions. I haven't seen any of these.
I'd like to see his other stuff. Do we want to do the double bill question? So what film would you pair straight time with? You can give me more than one. If you're making a double bill, either for yourself or some people, depending on the vibe, what film or films would you pair straight time with?
I mean, the first one that jumped to mind, it isn't my pick, but the first one that jumped to mind was Killing of a Chinese Bookie. In terms of the style.
I was going to mention that one, actually.
Yeah, both versions are good, whichever one you want. The lived-in feeling of LA and the kind of vibe that it's like these are just real people trying to get by and stuff like that. But the actual film I picked was The Friends of Eddie Coyle because I think thematically there's some similarities. The idea of just doing a job and, seeing it through and stuff like that in terms of the crime aspect of it is kind of interesting. And I think the ending is similar to what Max Denbo goes through, and you get to see Robert Mitchum. So that's always a plus.
That's always a plus.
Slightly less people might have seen The Friends of Eddie Coyle. I don't know, but
I think more people have seen that one than Straight Time.
Maybe.
I always hear people.
That's Straight Time for sure, but Killing of a Chinese Bookie, I'm not sure.
Oh no, yeah, probably Killing of a Chinese Bookie is bigger than Friends of Eddie Coyle. All three.
What would you think? Why would you think a good pairing with? Yours is usually good.
Well, I have 4 different ones for different vibes. I'll just go through them quite quickly. The very first one was The Incident by Larry Pierce, which was released in 1967. This is mainly takes place on a New York subway, and it's 2 guys who are just creating chaos on there, and it's the tension there. One of the guys played by an extremely young Martin Sheen.
Yeah.
And they're just big dickheads, and it's just the New York vibes. So if you're going for LA versus New York and the tension that both those cities have, you could do that. Another one that I thought of was The Bad Sleep Well, the Kurosawa one.
Mm-hmm.
The tension of not knowing what's going to happen next. Someone who's committed a crime. You're trying to figure out why they're committing this crime, why they won't let it go. So kind of mixes with the Max Denbo being like, why can't he just stop? Another one that I thought of was Mikey and Nicky, the LA in May, 1976. In Straight Time, there's a bit of a buddy film element to it, where we're seeing kind of Max and Jerry, riffing off of each other. And
definitely, it almost feels like they live in the same world as Straight Time.
And visually kind of. And most of Mikey and Nicky takes place at night versus the daytime elements. Actually, I meant to mention that there's a lot of day elements, like everything kind of takes place during the day, apart from the poker scene. And then the last one I thought of, you've watched Straight Time, you're feeling tense, and you want something that's a little bit funnier, a little bit more fun. I thought of Take the Money and Run, which is Woody Allen, 1969 film. Yeah. It's a crime film. He's an idiot in it. It's funny. It gives you that contrast of being like, these are 2 people who should not be committing crimes, but for different reasons. One is just wholly incompetent. The other one is competent, but just doesn't know when to stop. So those are the 4.
Yeah, the first one that jumped in my head was actually going to be Good Times, the Safdie brothers one.
Yeah, that's another one.
Because I thought that's kind of if you want a more modern one. I do appreciate you picking a film that I haven't seen. Yeah, I know you'd like to do that. So
The Incident? I did tell you about that one.
Did you? Well, I've added it to my list. So there you go.
Every time I tell this man about a film, he's like, "Did you tell me about that one?" Like, yeah.
Well, you tell me about a lot of films, so I write them all down.
You should just be recording all the conversations.
I should make a Felicia. Well, I kind of do actually have one on my letterbox. So
that was Straight Time for you. I hope you, as you said, hope you watch it. But Darragh, thank you so much for coming back on the show with me and talking about what, in my opinion, is quite possibly the best heist film of all time. And I'm saying that as someone who likes a lot of heist films. But thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Seeing Faces in Movies is an official podcast of the Arroyo Film Club. It's hosted and edited by Felicia Maroney. Intro music by Lamar Walker. If you like what you heard, let us know at seeingfacesmovies.com or send us an email at seeingfacesmovies@gmail.com. And while you're at it, please subscribe and rate the show wherever you listen to your podcast.